There is a picture that lives deep in the collective imagination of what a good gardener looks like. The gardener is down on her knees, the sun is warm and golden on her back, and beside her rests a steadily growing pile of wilting, defeated weeds. Her hands are caked with soil, her brow glistens with honest sweat. She is pulling and pulling and pulling. And in that picture, we absolutely believe she is winning. We believe she is doing the sacred, necessary, tireless work of keeping the garden clean, orderly, and under control. I want to offer you a different picture today. The same gardener, the same dirt, the same warm sun, but her hands are still. She is not pulling, she is not yanking. She is watching, she is learning, she is listening. She is working with the weeds instead of waging an endless, exhausting war against them. And in this picture, I want to suggest, she is not losing her garden. She is finally, truly starting to understand it. The truth that took me many years, a perpetually sore lower back, and an almost religious devotion to the weeding hoe to finally grasp is this. Pulling weeds, the way most of us were taught to do it, is not the solution to the weed problem. It is, in so many ways, part of the problem itself. Every single time we yank a weed out by its roots, we are disturbing the soil. We open the delicate surface crust up to the drying wind and the pounding sun. We expose the living, breathing, incredibly complex network of fungal hyphae and beneficial bacteria that lives just below the surface to a sudden, catastrophic death by ultraviolet light. We create a tiny little crater of bare, disturbed earth, and we essentially hang a flashing neon vacancy sign that says, "Open soil here, weed seeds welcome. Please germinate immediately." And the weed seeds do. They always do. Because nature abhors a vacuum, and she will fill that bare patch of soil with something green, and that something will almost always be a plant we did not intentionally put there. So we pull again. The soil gets disturbed again. More seeds blow in. More seeds are brought to the surface from the deep, dormant seed bank by our own actions. We are trapped in a cycle of our own making, and we call it gardening. Today, I'm going to walk you through a completely different approach, a way that doesn't leave you exhausted on Sunday evening with nothing to show for your efforts except a trash can full of green waste and a back that needs a heating pad. A way that actually builds your soil, saves precious water, increases the productivity of your vegetables, and turns the weeds from your sworn hated enemy into a quiet, helpful, and endlessly instructive teacher. We are, together, going to stop pulling weeds and start doing this instead. The very first shift we have to make, and I will warn you, it is the hardest one because it's a shift in our mindset, is to stop seeing every weed as a mindless, aggressive invader and start seeing it as a messenger. Weeds do not appear randomly. They are not acts of cosmic punishment for a garden you neglected. Each and every weed species thrives in a very specific set of soil conditions, and those conditions tell a clear, readable story if we know how to interpret the language. When a particular weed shows up repeatedly, it is nature's way of tapping you on the shoulder and saying, "Excuse me, there's something going on in this soil that needs attention." If you have a patch of soil that is compacted, hard as concrete, lacking air and water infiltration, nature does not send you a delicate little lettuce seedling. She sends in the big guns, the tap-rooted weeds. Dandelion, with its deep, thick, penetrating root that can break through hardpan like a living drill bit. Burdock, whose root goes down seemingly to the center of the earth. Dock, with its stubborn, branching taproot. The entire purpose of these plants is to break open that compaction. Their roots drive down, cracking the hard layers, creating channels for water to trickle deep and for air to circulate. And as they do this, their roots are pulling up minerals from the deep subsoil, calcium, potassium, magnesium, trace elements that the shallow-rooted vegetables can never reach. They concentrate those minerals in their leaves. If you simply rip the dandelion out of the ground and toss it in the trash, you are exporting all of those precious mined minerals off your property entirely. The soil remains compacted, the mineral imbalance remains uncorrected, and a new dandelion seed, floating on the wind, will land within the week and start the same exact job all over again. You did not solve a problem, you just reset the clock. If you have an area that is overly acidic and lacking in available calcium, chickweed will show up to tell you. So will sheep sorrel, with its distinctive arrow-shaped leaves and its bright lemony tang. If your soil is waterlogged, heavy, and starved of oxygen, you will see buttercups spreading, their waxy yellow flowers a cheerful warning sign of drainage issues. Horsetail, that ancient, primitive plant that looks like a tiny bamboo forest, is a screaming alarm that your soil is compacted and poorly drained, and often that it is also acidic. If your soil is actually rich, fertile, and well-drained, but has been recently disturbed by tilling or digging, you will get the rapid colonizers, lamb's quarters, purslane, pigweed, amaranth. These are not indicators of a problem. They are indicators of opportunity. They are nature's emergency response team, covering bare soil as fast as possible to protect it from erosion and to begin the process of rebuilding organic matter. Each one of these plants is a message, and once you learn to read those messages, you can start to address the underlying condition that invited the plant in the first place. You are no longer just treating a symptom, the visible weed, with the blunt instrument of pulling. You're healing the soil itself. That is the difference between fighting a never-ending battle and becoming a true steward of the land. So the first thing we do, instead of pulling, is we observe. We walk the garden with a curious eye, not a judgmental one. We keep a little notebook in our back pocket. We notice which weeds are growing, and we ask them, silently or aloud, "What are you trying to tell me about this spot of earth?" And then we address the root cause, not the symptom. If it's compaction, we stop walking on that bed. We broad fork it gently to lift the soil without inverting it, and we actually let the deep taproots of the dandelions and the docks do their work for a season. They are doing your broad forking for you, for free. If it's acidity, we add a gentle dusting of agricultural lime or crushed eggshells or wood ash from the winter stove. If it's a bare, disturbed patch, we cover it immediately with a thick blanket of organic mulch or a dense cover crop, so the weed seeds already present in the soil, and there are thousands of them in every square foot, never receive the flash of light they need to germinate. Once we have heard the message and begun to address the underlying soil condition, the second thing we do instead of pulling is we smother. Smothering is simply the beautiful, gentle practice of blocking light from reaching the soil surface. Weeds are plants, and plants are solar-powered. They run on sunlight. If you cut off the sunlight completely and consistently, you cut off the weed. It will exhaust its stored energy trying to push new growth up into the darkness, and it will eventually give up and die right there, underground, where its body becomes food for the worms. No pulling required, no back strain, no soil disturbance. The best tool I have ever found is the humble, abundant, free cardboard box. Not the glossy, colorful packaging with shiny printing and plastic tape, plain, brown shipping boxes. Flatten them out, remove any tape you can, and lay them right down on top of the weeds, even the thick, stubborn ones. Overlap the edges generously by at least 6 to 8 inches so no sliver of light can sneak through a gap and give a determined weed a fighting chance. Wet the cardboard thoroughly with a hose until it is sodden and heavy and conforms to the contours of the ground beneath it. Then, over that wet cardboard, pile a thick layer of organic mulch. Straw from the feed store, shredded autumn leaves you gathered last fall, grass clippings from the lawn, whatever you have in abundance. The deeper the better, but aimed for a minimum of 4 inches. 6 is even better. This blanket of cardboard and mulch accomplishes 3 miraculous things all at once. It kills the existing weeds beneath by starving them of the light they need to photosynthesize. It prevents new weed seeds blown in on the wind or dropped by birds from ever reaching the soil surface to germinate. And as the cardboard slowly rots and the mulch slowly breaks down, they feed the entire soil food web. The worms come up to feast on the decaying cardboard. The fungi send their thread-like hyphae through the moist, dark interface between soil and mulch. Over the course of a season, you have built an inch of gorgeous, dark, crumbly, living topsoil, where before there was just a patch of tired, weedy dirt.
This method is often called sheet mulching or lasagna gardening, and it is the closest thing to actual magic I have ever encountered in the garden. You can do it in the fall on a spent vegetable bed and have a weed-free, ready-to-plant paradise waiting for you in the spring with no tilling, no digging, and no wrestling with a rototiller. You can do it around existing perennials, fruit trees, and shrubs, being careful to leave a little donut of breathing room around the trunks and crowns so you don't encourage rot. And the absolute best part is that this method requires almost no physical strain, no bending and yanking, no hauling heavy root balls free of soil, no hauling wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of green waste to the compost pile. You just lay down the cardboard, you spread the mulch, and you let nature do what nature does best: decompose, transform, and renew.
The third practice we are going to adopt instead of pulling is a technique that feels almost rebellious at first. It's called chop and drop, and once you start doing it, you will never look at a patch of weeds the same way again. Instead of pulling the whole plant out of the ground, roots and all, you simply take a pair of scissors or garden shears or a sickle or even just your two hands, and you cut the weed off right at the soil surface. You sever the top growth from the root mass, and then you leave the root exactly where it is, underground, undisturbed, in the dark. That root will slowly, gently decompose in place. As it decomposes, it feeds the worms and the billions of microbes that live in the rhizosphere, the zone of life around plant roots. And as the root body shrinks and vanishes, it leaves behind a network of tiny, hollow channels called root pathways. These channels are pure gold for soil structure. They allow water to infiltrate deeper and faster. They allow air to reach the roots of your vegetables. They create highways that the next generation of plant roots and fungal hyphae can follow. And the top growth, the leafy green part you just cut off, you simply drop it right there on the soil surface at the base of the plant you were trying to favor. It becomes a free green manure mulch. It shades the soil, slowing evaporation and keeping the ground cool. As it wilts and dries in the sun, it returns its nutrients, the nitrogen, the potassium, the phosphorus, the trace minerals, right back to the soil surface, where the next rain will wash them down to your vegetable roots. You have taken a plant that was, moments before, competing with your intended crops for water and sunlight and nutrients, and with one single quick snip, you have transformed it into food for your soil and a protective blanket for your garden. It is alchemy. This technique works spectacularly well with annual weeds, the soft, quick-growing ones like chickweed, henbit, dead nettle, annual bluegrass, and the tender young sprouts of pigweed. It works less well, I must be honest, with deeply perennial rhizomatous weeds like bindweed, quackgrass, or creeping bellflower. Those persistent plants store enormous energy reserves in their root systems, and one chop will not kill them. For those, you need persistent smothering over multiple seasons, or you need to very carefully dig out the root system once and then mulch heavily. But for the vast majority of common garden weeds you face on a weekly basis, chop and drop is faster than pulling, it is infinitely less destructive to the living soil, and it keeps the precious nutrients you have been building in your soil right where they belong, cycling in the system, rather than exporting them to the municipal compost facility. Now, there is a secret weapon in the weed management toolbox that is so beautiful, so delicious, and so abundantly generous that it almost feels like the garden is playing a trick on us. Many of the plants we have been trained to call weeds are not just edible, they're often significantly more nutritious than the vegetables we carefully start from seed, tend for months, and harvest with pride. Take purslane, the common garden weed that spreads in flat, succulent, reddish-stemmed rosettes across every bare patch of summer soil, the one you've probably scraped off the path with a hoe 100 times. Purslane has more omega-3 fatty acids than any other leafy green plant ever measured. It is a genuine, verifiable superfood. It has more vitamin E than spinach, more beta-carotene than carrots, and it's full of magnesium and potassium. And it's delicious. The leaves are crisp and juicy with a lemony, slightly salty tang that brightens a salad or adds a cooling crunch to a taco. You can wilt it into soups. You can add it to smoothies. It is a gift, and it grows itself with absolutely no effort from you.
Dandelion greens, the young, tender leaves that emerge in early spring before the plant flowers, have more iron than spinach, more calcium than broccoli, and a pleasant, slightly bitter flavor that stimulates the digestive system and supports the liver. Blanch them briefly to mellow the bitterness and toss them with olive oil and garlic for a dish that costs $20 at a fancy restaurant. Young lamb's quarters leaves are so tender, so mild, and so similar in texture to spinach that they are literally called wild spinach in many communities. They cook up exactly the same. They're rich in protein, calcium, and vitamin A. Garlic mustard, for all its reputation as an invasive plant in North American woodlands, is a wonderfully pungent garlicky green that makes an absolutely spectacular pesto when blended with walnuts, olive oil, and Parmesan. Stinging nettles, handled with a glove, are transformed by a quick blanching into a deeply nourishing tea or a creamy soup that is rich in silica, iron, and a full spectrum of minerals that support healthy skin, hair, and joints. When we learn to identify, harvest, and eat these plants, the entire emotional equation of the garden shifts. We are no longer losing productive space to invaders. We are gaining a wild, self-planting, resilient perennial crop that we did not have to purchase, start in trays under grow lights, harden off on the porch, water, and fret over. We just walk outside, identify, and harvest. And in the act of eating these weeds, we are keeping all those deep subsoil minerals right here in our own bodies, on our own land. This is the ultimate, most satisfying way to stop pulling weeds. You don't pull the weed because it is your lunch. You are far too busy eating it.
The fifth practice I want to share with you is the intentional use of living mulches and cover crops. Bare soil, I want you to really absorb this, is a wound in the living skin of the earth. It is not a neutral state. It is a state of emergency. Nature abhors bare soil with a passion that can be hard for us tidy-minded humans to understand. She will fill that bare soil with something green as quickly as her resources allow, and that something will almost always be a plant we label a weed. If we want to prevent weeds without pulling them, we must keep the soil covered at all times, not just with dead mulch like straw or wood chips, but with living, photosynthesizing plants that are actively feeding the soil biology with their root exudates. A living mulch is a low-growing, dense carpet of plants that you intentionally seed or encourage between your main crops. White clover is a classic, a true workhorse of the living mulch world. It stays low, only a few inches tall, so it does not compete with light for your tomatoes or your peppers. It fixes atmospheric nitrogen from the air into the soil, feeding your heavy-feeding crops for free. Its tiny white flowers feed the bees and the beneficial insects all season long, and its dense, mat-forming growth habit outcompetes almost any annual weed that tries to sneak in. Creeping thyme is another beautiful option, aromatic and evergreen in milder climates, releasing its scent when you brush against it. Sweet alyssum, with its drifts of tiny white or purple flowers, attracts hoverflies, whose larvae are voracious aphid predators. In the vegetable garden, when a bed finishes producing in the late summer or early fall, instead of leaving that bare, exhausted soil exposed to the winter rains and the wind, we immediately sow a cover crop. Winter rye is my personal standby. It germinates in cold soil, it grows a dense, fibrous root system that holds the soil in place over the winter, and it scavengers any leftover nutrients from the vegetable crop, storing them in its tissues so they don't leach away. In the spring, you cut the rye down with a scythe or a mower, leave the roots in place, and plant your seedlings directly into the thatch. Hairy vetch is a legume cover crop that fixes nitrogen and creates a gorgeous purple-flowered mat. Crimson clover is another nitrogen fixer, its deep red blooms a magnet for bees. Buckwheat is a warm-season cover crop that grows with astonishing speed, smothering weeds in a matter of weeks and bringing in pollinators from miles around. When you use cover crops in living mulches, you are essentially farming weed prevention. You are growing the plants you do want so densely, so intentionally, so thoroughly that there is simply no room, no light, no bare space for the plants you don't want to find a foothold. The weed seeds are still there in the soil, but they never germinate because the conditions never trigger them.
They just wait, dormant, a silent seed bank that cause you no trouble whatsoever. And finally, there is one more practice that I want to offer you. It is the tool of patience, of observation, and of a gentle reframing of the entire role a garden plays in our lives. So many of the plants we have been taught to hate, to pull on sight, to eradicate, are actually deeply integrated into the local ecosystem in ways we can barely see and rarely appreciate.
That patch of goldenrod glowing yellow in the back corner of the property in late summer, it is not a mess. It is a fueling station for the monarch butterflies on their migration south. It feeds dozens of species of native bees. Its roots host symbiotic fungi that improve the health of the soil for yards around. That thicket of wild asters with their tiny daisy-like flowers, it is a nursery for the larvae of beneficial insects, the very same lacewings and ladybugs and parasitic wasps that will patrol your spring garden and devour the aphids off your roses and your beans. That tall, blooming dandelion on the lawn is the very first source of pollen and nectar for the bumblebee queens emerging from hibernation in early spring, desperate for energy to start their colonies. Without that dandelion, that queen may fail. When we stop pulling just for a single moment, and we look, and we breathe, and we listen, we begin, slowly at first, to see our gardens not as battlefields with clear lines of enemy and ally, but as communities. We are not the generals in a brutal war against nature. We are the gentle, humble stewards of a staggeringly complex, intricately connected web of life. And our job, our sacred responsibility, is not to eliminate everything we did not personally plant. Our job is to tend the web, to guide it, to make space for our beans and our tomatoes, yes, absolutely, but also to make a little room, a little margin for the plants that arrived here on their own, the ones that have a job to do that we might not yet fully understand. I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, that when you start to practice this, when you trade the weeding hoe for the observing eye, your relationship with the garden will transform. You will feel less like a janitor and more like a partner. You will notice things you never saw before. The tiny iridescent beetle on the porcelain, the goldfinch balancing on the seed head of the thistle you didn't cut down, the earthworm castings under the cardboard you laid a month ago. You will start to heal not just the soil, but your own sense of belonging in the living world. So here is my invitation to you. This weekend, or the next time you walk out into your garden and see that familiar patch of green that you didn't plant, I want you to try something. Do not reach for the trowel. Just stand there for a minute. Bend down, look at the weeds. Really look. Notice which ones are thriving. Touch the soil. Is it hard and dry? Is it soft and crumbly? Ask, with genuine curiosity, what these plants might be trying to tell you about the dirt beneath your feet. And then choose a different path. Smother them with cardboard and mulch. Cut them at the base and drop the leaves where they fall. Harvest a handful for your dinner. Sow a scattering of clover seeds into the bare patch, or simply decide to let a few be just this once, to see what happens, to watch what insects come to visit, to learn a little more about the community you are a part of. You might be surprised at what unfolds. You might find that your soil becomes softer, darker, and sweeter smelling. You might find that your vegetable yields actually increase because the soil life is undisturbed and the beneficial insects have habitat. You might find that your back aches less on Monday morning and that you start to genuinely look forward to your time in the garden again, instead of feeling a low, dull dread at the endless chore that never ever gets finished. On Everyday Harvest, the whole philosophy we try to live by is about finding the easier, the kinder, the smarter, the more regenerative path. The path that works with nature instead of against her. The path that builds something lasting and beautiful instead of just extracting and depleting. And when it comes to the plants we call weeds, that path is wide and soft and waiting patiently for us to step onto it. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this video shifted even a little bit of how you see the wild plants in your garden, please hit that thumbs up so more gardeners and growers can discover a path with a little less war and a lot more peace.
And if you haven't subscribed to Everyday Harvest yet, I would be so deeply honored to welcome you into this community of folks who are learning, growing, and rethinking the old rules together. Now go outside, leave the trowel by the shed, and just look at what is growing. I'll see you in the next one.